Hello, this is Deborah Anderson, the Black Woman Animator, coming back to you with another video. And in this video, I have Craig Clark. Welcome.
Hello, welcome everyone.
Can you give a little intro about yourself?
Hi, I'm Craig Clark. Boy, I've been in the business for quite a while, over 40 years, believe it or not.
Nice.
So yeah, I started in Santa Monica, where I grew up. I was born in Santa Monica and grew up in Malibu area. And basically, my mom was a school teacher in the Santa Monica schools, and I had affinity for doing drawings. So I would come into the school classrooms and help the kids draw. And then it just happens that one of the kids was actually a son of an animator who brought basically one of the sons had a career day type of a thing, and they brought in the Flip Wilson special, the 1974 Flip Wilson special, and I kind of hit it off with them, and I started an apprenticeship at Duck Soup Productions. I was like 14 years old at that time.
Nice.
And for like 5 years, I was basically going in and out doing tests for them, and eventually ended up working for them during the college summers when I was going to college at Cal State Long Beach. And from there, I just started freelancing around town and started doing character animation, effects animation, eventually 3D animation. And went back from 3D animation into a traditional, 2D drawing animation, because I miss drawing. Because I was doing a lot of non-drawing related animation, and I wanted to get back to that because that's kind of my first love. So I just kept with that, and then eventually I started telling stories, writing comics, and now I'm like an independent animator, doing my own show called The Custom Monsters. And I still do freelance, etc. But it's kind of self-contained. I use Flash at this point. I'm going on the next feature. I've done 2 feature films out of my house, out of the studio here, and 20 television episodes out of my house here, half-hour a piece, for the past 10 years. They've been on OSI 74, on Roku. You can see them. The Custom Monster Show. Let's see, and I'm going to do a third Custom Monsters movie, and I'm going to transition from Flash to Toon Boom. So now in the process of relearning Toon Boom, and I want to take all the skills. I used to do music as well, so I want to do my own album that goes with it, so it'll be kind of a musical type of a thing. And recently, I've been exploring my ancestry through Ancestry.com, and I found out that I'm actually indigenous American on both sides of my family. So as I've been doing research, I found out that many Black Americans that are from the United States are actually American Indians. About 85% of them. We were misclassified as African Americans. Only about 15% actually came from Africa. If you can go to slavevoyages.com, you can actually see the shipping manifest, and you can see exactly how many people they brought over. So we've basically been hoodwinked a bit. So I found out that my side of the family, on my dad's side of the family, we go back to 250 BC in the United States. And my mom's side of the family, I've gone far as back as the 1600s. So it's basically the Revolutionary War and the Powhatan tribe. And I've been doing some American Indian cartoons I did on the Choctaw side. On my dad's side, I did one for Chief Warhorse, and I'm starting to do some shorts with that. And as of yesterday, I just finished one with the Accomack tribe, who's one of the Powhatan Confederacy tribes. My mom's side is from the Pamunkey tribe. So yeah, I'm trying to bring that out, since I come from an education background, and tell these stories that people don't really know, and hopefully that'll give people a little bit information, and proud to be an American, and then figure out exactly where we come from, who we are, and to kind of reclaim our place in this country, So that's kind of, at this late point in my life, I figured, with the Hollywood studio system, it's off and on, up and down. So I'm figuring out that I'm more of an independent animator, and kind of my mission at this point is kind of bring that story out. So that's kind of where I am at this point. And I'm also teaching as well, so I'm keeping that together. So no, that's the long and short of it. That's kind of where I am right at this point.
Okay, so you said you're from Santa Monica and grew up
Hmm.
in Malibu. So can you talk about how it was growing up? Not necessarily directly related to animation, just like
Uh-huh.
growing. How was it?
Yeah, it's interesting. Santa Monica is a beach town, and let's see. Uh, actually, my on my father's side, uh, there was a migration from New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my aunt on my dad's side came out from in the 40s first, and during World War II, and then later my grandmother, who grew up in New Orleans, the Slidell area,
Mm-hmm.
she passed away 3 years before I was born, but she was
Okay.
out in Santa Monica as well. And of course, my father made his way out to Santa Monica as well. So it's a funny story there. On my dad's side of the family, old Slidell, coming from Indian Village, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to cook for Louis Armstrong
Nice.
back in the 40s, actually the 30s. Let's see, it was 1930, right after the Mississippi flood, which was 27, and Louis Armstrong had a gig at the Cotton Club West, which is in Culver City,
Mm-hmm.
and basically he finished that gig and went back to New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my grandmother knew Louis, because
Mm-hmm.
before he went to New Orleans, he was practicing his stuff in Slidell.
Okay.
And so
Mm-hmm.
I guess, he's working on his chops so he can get to the big city, which is New Orleans. And so they knew
Okay.
each other. And so every Friday, she would cook him some meals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. I guess she was a good cook because we have this gumbo recipe has been going through the family.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing it now. So anyway, he did this cartoon, the Betty Boop cartoon, and
Mm-hmm.
you probably saw it. He left there and went to New York, and it was called "I'll Be Glad When You're Dead, You Rascal You," and it's
Mm-hmm.
all it's all about cooking, right? So
Yeah.
I'm thinking I put two together. I didn't know this until years later,
Right.
and I actually met Grim Natwick, who developed Betty Boop at Duck Soup Productions, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know the story at that time because I would have,
Right.
you know, approached him at that point. So
Yeah.
anyway, and my mom, she's from Ohio, and as I do my research, her side of the family came from Virginia originally,
Mm-hmm.
and I did the research where they came through during the Revolutionary War. They were in Virginia, and during the Civil War, there was a migration from Virginia to Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom and my dad met in Ohio and got married, and then went to Santa Monica. So there's a kind of a group of mostly Southern transplants in Santa Monica. So it was a little bit, it was a small Black community there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I went to Amy Church, et cetera, et cetera. And, I
Mm-hmm.
played sports there. I played football and all that stuff. And my dad was a coach.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a semi-professional athlete now, so he was kind, he's very, very adept and he led it in four sports. So I was playing a lot of sports,
Mm-hmm.
and I was into drawing and education and all that stuff. So it was a well-rounded thing.
Yeah.
Now, when I went to Malibu, I was like the only Black person there,
Mm-hmm.
because that's kind of a upscale place. I think there were just a handful. There was like Flip Wilson's son was there,
Mm-hmm.
Matt Robinson, and Holly Robinson. You probably know she's an actress. Yeah,
Yeah.
we grew up with them, so everybody knows each other, But
Mm-hmm.
we went to high school. It was at Santa Monica High School, so they bused us from Malibu to Santa Monica. So it was, and I didn't feel any kind of racism in Santa Monica or in Malibu, which was cool.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
when I went to like other parts of Los Angeles, like Orange County, it was a whole different deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was you're surfing, and they're like, watch out for the no blow and stuff. So it's like, what so all kinds of stories on that. But that was later when I went to college at Cal State Long Beach.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I kind of grew up in we're in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
and so the studios were still happening. MGM was still in business in
Mm-hmm.
Culver City. We drive there and you see the different movies going by. And 20th Century Fox was still around. But basically, I remember before they did the demolishment for Century City, they
Mm-hmm.
still had the sets of like Hello Dolly, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was on the West Side Studios, and then the Valley Studios like Warner Brothers and Disney. I didn't really go over that much, but the West
Okay.
Side, you go to and you see, so there's always there. In fact, I was a precocious kid. I remember looking in the phone book, and I was looking up Hal Roach. Oh, Hal Roach. Oh, his phone number's here. Let me give him a call. So he's the director of the Little Rascals. I call him up. Hi, is this Hal Roach? Oh, yes, it is. I like your films. So thank you very much. Goodbye, Mr. Rose. Goodbye. And it was actually him. And I was like, he's in the phone book. It's like, so I was doing stuff like that. So, anyway.
That was a cool thing
So
about the phone book. I would look up my teachers. I wouldn't call them, but I would like find out the first name of my teachers in school and be like, what is their phone number? Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, I know. I call them up. I know. Yeah, it was a trip. So I haven't seen a phone book in years. So I guess they still print them. Huh? But so anyway, yeah. So yeah.
I just moved to LA last year from New Orleans after 12 years.
Oh,
so
you're in Los Angeles?
I'm familiar with like the LA to LA migration. Some of my friends had people who moved from Louisiana to Los Angeles or like California. So I'm familiar with that like migration.
Right.
And then I'm familiar with Slidell because I lived in.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Chief Warhorse, the whole deal, huh? Okay. Yeah. So yeah.
So
Clark's, we've been there forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Porter Cemetery. That's my family cemetery.
Okay. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So were your parents supportive of your artistic interests?
They were, from an early age, because I was, I was interested in anime, watching cartoons since I was a little dude. I remember, Channel 11 was our favorite channel. They'd see me drawing, and I think at 10 years old, I did this whole little book of cartoons, all by animal groups. They had the pig page, the dog page, and it's like that. And we had a black and white television, so I didn't have the colors. And so I just draw them off the black and white, and then I go to the Newberries and look at the comic books or the coloring books and see what the colors. And I go back home and color them. Oh, okay, this one's blue. Because I didn't know. So yeah, there was always, and then when I was doing the thing at Duck Soup at 14, it was like, oh, well, he's found something he wants to do. So that they kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do, but they wanted to make sure that I got a college education. So that was the deal, because I was thinking of just going to CalArts. And then we looked at it and they said, well, you're not really getting a well-rounded education. And then when I was at Duck Soup, they were saying, you probably want to get a more well-rounded education, even though they knew CalArts was a good school. It's just starting at that point. Right. So I went to Cal State Long Beach as well. And it was a really good school. Yeah. As far as the drawing skills, especially the life drawing and the illustration and all that stuff was really strong. And I was getting my animation background on the job. Yeah. And so I ended up doing 2 films, so it worked out. But, I knew from the beginning it's tough to stay employed, because the old guys would tell me, there's a lot of like layoffs, and you bump from studio to studio. And even that was back in those days. Right. So yeah, I know it's going to be a challenge, but that's what I wanted to do. So yeah, they were behind it. They were behind it. Yeah.
So what do you think the benefits of the well-rounded education was? Like, did you see it immediately, or looking back, do you see, okay, that's why they wanted me to get the well-rounded education?
Well, I coming from the education background, I knew that it was important. And then as I move on through life, then especially business, which they didn't really teach you at art school, right. I think that it really should be especially that last semester, recommend, prerequisite, to get out of there. Because if you're an artist, you have to know how to do your taxes. You have to do, how to put a business together, and all that stuff should be included. But as far as like history and the geography and I don't know, biology and things that if you're animating a show or writing a show, you're going to have to know about these things. If you have a background, that's going to help you. Like, for instance, Steven Hillenburg, who developed SpongeBob, he was a marine biologist major, and then he went into animation. So you see how that turned out. Yeah. SpongeBob, it was all about marine biology, essentially. But, he had that background, and that gave him the impetus, because of that well-rounded background, to do his animation character. So, yeah. yeah, you know, it worked. But then you have to go back and, you know, figure out, you know, what animation principles are and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
you're kind of doubling your work, but it kind of helps you in the background, you know, and something to fall back on. So yeah, that's my thought.
So how did you end up getting cast in the educational short Forgive and Forget?
You go way back now. So this is 1968. So I was in third grade and going to it was a John Muir school, and I, you know, basically E.E. Schwartz, who was the principal of the school, knew this actor, and his name was Shep Menken, and he's the voice that did Charlie the Tuna and Clyde Crash Cup, etc., etc. And then, you know, he was looking for some kids. So this is 68. So there's, you know, it was a very volatile period. You know, we were coming out of what happened to Martin and the riots were going on. They were trying to come up with a kind of a warm, sensitive, you know, subject to bring the people together, to bring the races together. So they came up with this movie called Forgive and Forget, which is a 16 millimeter, 15-minute short. And my name came up, you know, because I was going to school. I was in third grade at the time, and they met me and said, "Oh, good, go ahead and do it." You know, so I shot it there, and shot it in Malibu and in Hollywood, and you know, I guess it was a hit, educational hit. At least I go to LA schools. Like, I know you were in school, especially with playing football in Venice. You know, it's like, hey, you were in that chicken movie, right? And he's like, you know, yeah, that was me. So anyway, so I was thinking, well, maybe I want to be an actor, because at that point, the Julia show was happening. You know, the marque-page thing with the Diane Carroll and all that stuff. And I was, and I had like an agent for a while, and there weren't any roles at that point. It was like two black actors. It was like marque-page of George Spell, and he was getting everything, and that was it at that point.
Yeah.
So it's different now, but you know, anyway. So anyway, so that, you know, it's like, okay, well, it's not too much action job. Maybe let's stick with the animation. So anyway, I went that route.
So as someone who got opportunities in high school, I teach at a media arts high school right now in Crenshaw. So is there any advice that you can give to my 9th and 10th graders that I teach for like getting started now?
Getting started now? Yeah. Learn as much life drawing as you can. Okay. And mostly if you want to do animations, mostly quick sketches. You go to the beach, into the coffee shop, or you know, sit in the basketball court and just do quick sketches and storytelling drawings and sequential art and that type of thing. And just because it's it's going to take about 10,000 drawings to get the bad drawings out and get the good ones going. So the more you do, the better. And also, you know, look at light and shadow, and study light. Study perspective, because that's another thing, because you want to put your characters in a background. And you know, look at film and stop. You know, since we all have video now, you can freeze frame stuff and just do draw overs, and you can find out a lot about, you know, camera angles and perspective and things like that through that. And even fine art. You can you know, do your interpretation of whatever, you know, like a Tiepolo drawing, whatever, you know. Also, study color. Your color theory is very, very important. Especially nowadays with the CG. I've noticed a lot of really intense art direction. So look at a lot of animated films, modern animated films. They're really, really strong with the art direction. So that's probably a good thing. And watch as many films as you can. So yeah, and just keep going. Don't stop. Yeah.
So this is the part of the interview where I list like projects you worked on, and the important part is that even though we're few in the animation industry, there's more than we realize. And so just highlighting that Black people have worked on some of your favorite things. So you've been like layout artist, character layout artist, storyboard artist, animator, visual effects. You've been everything. So you worked on A Nightmare on Elm Street, This Is America, Charlie Brown, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, The Simpsons, An American Tale, Feeble Goes West, Frosty Returns, Rugrats, Rocko's Modern Life, Adam's Family Values, Forrest Gump, The Mask, Mortal Kombat, Mission Hill, The Oblongs, and then many more outside of that, but also some personal projects is Astro Thrill, The Custom Monsters and Friends, Timbuktu, and The Custom Monsters movie. So that's a lot. And that's not even everything. So what are the various like new technologies you took the time to learn throughout your career? Because I know on Forrest Gump you did like JFK's mouth, and then I guess on The Mask, was that your first CG experience? Or
yeah, that era when they brought me up to ILM, yeah, I was like going to school every day. That was amazing.
So what are the various technologies that were like new at the time that you were the one who was like, oh, I'll take a shot at this?
Right. Yeah. Really. Basically, it was during the Automan show. Automan was produced by the same producer that produced Tron. So basically, it was the same crew and the same camera that the Tron was. So we're doing like really early motion control stuff. So the person who wrote the software is Bill Tondreau, I remember, and that means computer controlled camera. So that wasn't basically a hand crank thing. It was a computer that had a motor, and they would put in inputs as far as like the different directions, 6 different yaw, pitch, roll, Y, X, Y, and Z, et cetera, and they would do camera moves that way. And you get the slit scan stuff and all that special effects stuff. And then when you're writing your exposure sheets, you got these huge pieces of paper that because they have all these different passes, and you've probably seen the 7-Up commercials and things that Robert and Abel was doing. So that was my first entree into really sophisticated animation. It was bottom lit. Most of it was bottom lit, meaning that you'd have a lot of extra paper and frosted cells, and we'd have different filters in the camera, and you'd have different wedges where it tests of exposure, and you pick your exposure, etc., and you do different passes and things like that. Very expensive, laborious process of really CG look, but that was the engine at the time. And so from that, we use that same technology. I don't remember if you saw the movie A Star Chaser.
I don't think I've seen that. I'm
yeah,
sure
that was 1985. Yeah, so that was kind of an homage to Star Wars, and we'd have some early CG, probably the first CG in town for an independent production of spaceships, and so we would basically it was like a dot matrix printer. Was what we print that out onto the cells on. This is stereoscopic. It was left eye, right eye, etc. And so basically, the way we would animate it was we'd get out graph paper, and we figure out where you take the layout and figure out where the ship should be, and you pull up a frame under a little monochromatic computer at that point. Okay, we'll rough it, it's going to be here, and then we'll come up with another frame and then figure out it's going to be there. So in our graph paper, we would have numeric coordinates for each little point on the screen: X, Y, Z, yaw, pitch, and roll, etc. And so, for instance, we have a spaceship, coming towards camera and turning, going that way. And so there might be 6 extremes, and so there'll be 6 different numerical coordinates, right? Yeah. And so, okay, that looks good. And so we would send those numbers to get crunched. So it'd be a nice logarithmic progression, numerically, right? And then that would translate into the position of the digital ship that would be printed out on a cell and painted on the back. And we had to do left eye and right eye. So, and it was your stereoscopic ship, and it worked great. Work with the hand-drawn animation, and we'd have some bottom-lit animation for the lasers and things like that, and then it kind of worked. And this is 1985. So I was working with Bill Croyer and Chris Bailey, and we were like the 3 guys doing it, using the same Tron technology, the same Tron camera that we were using for Automan and Misfits of Science and all that stuff. And so, okay, that was the beginning of CG. Oh, see, that's interesting. All right, great. And so I didn't really pick up more CG animation until 94. Okay, because This is way before Pixar, et cetera, obviously. And I was still doing, just hand-drawn animation, hand-drawn effects, and character animation, etc. And then I think the last project that was traditional on film for me was Addams Family Values, and that was 1993. And then I was approached by ILM. They saw my, oh, he's the electricity guy. He's been doing electricity. Okay, why don't you come up to ILM? And so that was a real mind blower, because that was the first time I was actually on a computer, and everything was digital. There's no drawing at all. And so that was like going to college again, but intense. Your lunch periods would be like classes, and they write their own software. All the software that we use, like Maya and all the alias, that didn't exist. They didn't have their, in fact, they had their own renderer at that point called iShade. This is before RenderMan was still under Apple and all that stuff. They had their own, software. And so ILM, they write their own tools. And so, I was, the first thing I was doing was Roto. And so we'd use Parallax, and that was on Casper. I was on the Casper for like a week. And then they moved me to, I think it was Forrest Gump first. And then it was The Mask. So I did Forrest Gump first. They looked at my stuff that I did at Duck Soup. I did this funny commercial. It was a Levi's commercial with a talking dog, and I animate the dog. Billy, here's a legend on our block. It was a dog talking, right, with a little kid. So, he could do lip sync, So I learned my lip sync from Ambi Palawota, was a Disney animator, right? And then at the same cues that I use, well, why don't you come and work on this John F. Kennedy animation here? So and it made with this software called Elastic Reality, which I was learning on the spot, working with Jug Chang, who actually was the art director for the new Star Wars. In fact, they were working on they had the 3 Star Wars films, and they were going to do 3 more, and there was like the secret project, Project X. He'd be doing that inside while I was working on, So it's like he ended up the guy I was working with, Doug Chang, ended up art directing all the newer newer Star Wars. And so, working together on that. And there were a lot of other shots that we did. Lieutenant Dan with the replacing the legs, and I was learning how to paint digitally and all the green screen, blue screen, et cetera, et cetera. And that worked out really well because we were just seeing it, shot by shot.
Yeah.
And then I actually worked on the very first opening scene, which is the feather that's floating down.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing dust busting on that. They animated it digitally, so I was learning how to dust bust,
Mm-hmm.
And so they were so busy. They had 8 films going on at the time that they can only have 3 frames online, and they had to like blow it off and then bring on 3 more because they had like 8 projects going on. They had The Mask and all these Baby's Day Out and all these things. So this is before storage space was widespread as it is now. But that was really interesting. And then they finished that up and then went to The Mask. And that was really interesting, as you probably can imagine. I was doing a lot of digital painting on that as The Mask gets pulled off. And there's dance sequences where I was doing little digital cleanup, and things like that. So that was really, really fun. So so I got then on the side at night and on the weekends, I was learning Softimage because I wanted to learn 3D animation because at that point they were training 2D animation people to be 3D animation people because they weren't teaching in the schools. It was very new. So there was a point there where they were training 2D people to make that transition. Some studios, Disney would do that, DreamWorks would do that later, and ILM was doing it as well. And so I was learning that on my own. And so at that point, I was there for like maybe 6 or 7 months, and there was a layoff, and I got married. And my wife was working in Hollywood. She was assistant editor at the time. So I basically left ILM and went to RGA and worked on Mortal Kombat. And at that point, I had, Softimage was under my belt. And there was other software, Eddie, which was a new compositing software that they were coming up with, and a bunch of other stuff. And so I got really good at that. The story building skills, I was storyboarded the direct-to-video thing that goes with Mortal Kombat, So I was using more of my muscle, which is kind of cool. So yeah, it was really cool. And so I can continue with that, and then went to DreamWorks Interactive. Um, yeah, because it's interesting. We didn't get to the Simpsons thing yet, but during the we'll jump around. So
Yeah.
the Simpsons. This was '89. I just finished the 5 Charlie Brown specials in '88, and then '89 the Simpsons started up, and so I went to go to Classic Chibo to start on the Simpsons, and I worked on the first 7 episodes, including the opening title, and there was an opportunity to go to London to work on Fireball Goes West to do some effects animations. Like, oh, I never left the country, This show's not even on the area. It's not gonna be a hit, is it? Right? So, yeah, right. So, so I go there for a year, and it's basically that studio ended up basically becoming DreamWorks. So the majority of DreamWorks studio was basically that studio moved from London to Los Angeles. So I figured, well, going back to, we'll get to that story again, but it's going back to DreamWorks Interactive. I figured, well, there's a lot of people I know from Amblimation that might be there. So I went to their games division. At that point, I guess they weren't ready to do effects for Prince of Egypt. So I just, because I eventually wanted to go in the animation department, but I stayed in the games department, which is kind of cool. Which is cool because I actually got to work directly with Steven Spielberg, which is the first time, which is really cool, on Jurassic Park 2, which was The Lost World. So the way he works with that particular project, it's a big book. It's 900 pages, right? And he took the best 4 sequences, and he was trying to take these sequences and bridge them together in the movie. So I would do 3D pre-vig in Softimage with basically using the basis of some hand-drawn storyboards with another artist that went to Cal State Long Beach. His name is Dave Lowry. Steven Spielberg went to Cal State Long Beach too. So so it's the first time I've done all this stuff with Cal State Long Beach people, so it's just kind of cool. And so anyway, it worked out okay, which is kind of cool. At that point, I think Microsoft owned Softimage, and so there was a bit of a thing, getting the software to work and all that stuff. But it kind of worked, which is kind of cool. So
I mentioned that, like, when I got my first job in Korea, and I used Softimage, and I had I learned Maya in college, and I had never heard of Softimage before I went to
really?
Korea.
Yeah.
I just like, what is this program? And then I liked like at that point it was 2010, and so I liked some stuff better about Softimage than Maya. So it did something easier, but then Autodesk bought it and phased it out.
Right. Yeah, and prior to that, Maya was Alias. That's what it was called. And Alias was more of a modeling software more than animation, because their animation tools weren't up until they were purchased, and then it became.
Yeah, and I go by BlkWmnAnimator, but I'm actually a 3D modeler.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So Softimage's problem. There was a memory leak. And that was the deal, because you'd be working on these huge files, and things would crash, and you're doing these multi-processor networks, and it would just, if you have a lot of things going, so it was something that they had to fix, and they didn't do it in time. And I think what happened was Maya caught up, and that became the standard. So that's the to transition. Yeah. So that happens in 2D as well. Like Flash, for instance, Flash just kind of was a standard for like 20 years, but they didn't really work on the drawing tools. And so here comes Toon Boom, and now Toon Boom is the standard. So that's what happens. So if you're an animator into this business, be ready to change tools, because it's changing all the time, and be ready to learn the new software.
That's what I tell students, because like I worked at Turbo Squid in New Orleans, and they have an advisory board of people from various companies like CNN and IKEA and stuff like that. And I think there was a guy from Blizzard. He said, I think he was Blizzard. But he said that a lot of students come out of college and are like, I know 3ds Max, and it's like, no, you know 3D. You can learn any program. But they're just like one brain. So I try to tell my students, okay, if I'm teaching you Blender or if I'm teaching you Maya, you're just learning the 3D. You know 3D. You can, like, each different program, you're just learning the navigational tools. How do I do this that I know how to do in this program? So
right. That's true. That's true. And then, you know, with the same software you say, you know, it will change in 6 months with the new version.
Yeah.
And you got to learn it all over again. Oh, they moved everything, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a constant thing. Yeah, definitely, definitely. So if you know the language, you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. What was the biggest breakthrough in your career?
Breakthrough?
If you had multiple.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. In retrospect, you know, working on the Forrest Gump, that you know, and that was, you know, that was a pleasure, really, really working on that, just to seeing, because actually the crew won the Oscar, and that was great. Also at Boss Films, I was on Poltergeist 2. We got the Oscar for that. And then as far as longevity, it has to be The Simpsons. I mean, I was just on it for 3 seasons, but to have that thing still in production now, I did not see that coming at all. you know, you know. So yeah, yeah, and just to be a kind of a worldwide phenomenon that's going to outlive all of us, you know, because they're still going to be running those shows, those episodes, you know. So yeah, that was, those 2 things are probably it. And then, you know, what I'm doing my own is my own thing. But as far as the industry is concerned, those 2 things would probably be kind of the highlights. There've been others, but yeah, they'd be standing the test of time, maybe.
So, can you talk more about your music and how some of it has related to your art and animation? So I know there's soulful music, Bubblegum Death. You were a drummer for Chorus of Souls.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay, yeah, you know, 'cause I've been playing drums about as long as I've been animating, and I started like 8 years old, and I, you know, brought the drums to school and played. You know, I played in church a lot. That's when I first started playing in front of an audience, so I wasn't afraid of people, which is kind of cool. And then when I went to Cal State Long Beach, I was in you know, in high school, I was playing a Hendrix cover band. You know, doing that type of thing. So I was kind of working on my kind of jazz fusion chops, etc. And then the whole punk new wave thing happened in college, and so I was kind of the the over proficient drummer for a punk rock band. So that, you know, and that did pretty well. And you know, at that point, you know, we're open for a lot of you know, like Suburban Lawns and a lot of, you know, Berlin and stuff like, you know, the Go-Go Blasters and stuff like that. So, you know, so yeah, so you know, we were kind of scouted a little bit by Warner Brothers, so they'd be calling our dorm room, you know, asking when we'd be playing. It's like, well, am I going to do animation? Or am I going to do this music thing, you know?
Right.
And so I kind of looked at, you know, it took the long story, and then I figured, well, I better stick with the animation because the music might go up and down or whatever. You never know, you know. But I always kind of played on the side. So every Sunday, you know, even when I was animating, I'd have this band. Just a fun band. It was Bubblegum Death. It was you know, 2 players from the Sofa Music, which was my own, and we did our own stuff, you know. And it was just kind of, you know, fun music, and we played a couple shows and things like that. But I still have the tapes, and I used some of those songs that we did in my productions now. You know, in my movies, it's like, oh, this is 80s sounding stuff. Yeah, it's my stuff, you know. So I did that. And then I kind of stayed in touch with the music industry in terms of, you know, just following bands and you know, playing around, things like that. Ended up doing some album art for this band called the Nymphs. They were on Geffen Records, and you know, they came out at the same time as Nirvana and all that stuff. So that was kind of a big deal. I was doing music videos and all that stuff. And then I had during the Simpsons, I was on this band called Chorus of Souls. So it's kind of a gothic type of a band. And it was doing pretty well. There was a breakup because I went out to London to do Five Goes West. You know, they were kind of doing shows on their own, you know, with the with the you know, electronic drums. And I came back and I put all these shows together, like the Whiskey and stuff like that. And then the band broke up. It's like, oh, okay, right, you know. but you know, we got some airplay on the local radio. KXLU and a couple other stations was kind of cool. And so that's you know, that's you know, I've always had a affinity for music, is to kind of do my own stuff on my own. Every once in a while put out a single. And so this next feature, I want to get back into it because you know, the way things are working now, you know, I can probably, you know, work remotely in terms of like putting on shows and things like that, because a lot of the bands right now aren't playing live shows.
Right.
So I could do that. And then, the tools for distribution are a little bit different now. And a lot of the musicians are supposedly just going to promote themselves, because big record labels are no longer. So you're kind of on your own.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of it's a side thing, but it's still a love.
Yeah.
So yeah, animation's number one, and then I'm trying to get to the point where I can blend both of them. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for this year. So I'll be you probably see some storyboards behind me from the the watercolor things like that. So that was from Custom Monsters 2, but Custom Monsters 3 will be a little bit different. So yeah, so it's always been in the background, but yeah, I got punk rock roots.
So like I have never been a big like video game person because my twin brother would always beat me. So like in my adulthood, I came to like Rock Band. So I ended up getting an Xbox 360 just to play Rock Band. And so my favorite instruments to play are like the drums and the bass guitar. But
there you go.
What I noticed, okay, so with growing up like listening to Motown and gospel and all this stuff, there's like this cadence to drums. But then when I started playing Rock Band, there were like some drum things where I was like, what is this beat? I can't catch it. Like this is so different. So like what is the difference between like some of the rock drum beats? Like from your expert opinion, why couldn't I catch, like I would try to get the rhythm. I'm like, I don't understand this rhythm. Like cuz I guess I'm R&B and like gospel.
Well, a lot of our music and R&B and gospel it's a lot of the 2 and the 4, you know, and with the European stuff was more of the 1 and the 3.
Okay.
So that's that kind of, so the rock, influence is a combination of both, and then there's even more obscure things as well. Latin rhythms come in there, and you've got reggae rhythms are coming in there. It's a little bit different. And then there's the whole prog rock thing, which comes out of classical music, where you have these funny time signatures, like the King Crimsons, like, heard that jazz song, Count 5. Dun, 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 dun. That's 5/4, So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I was in band too, so.
Oh yeah, you know what's going on. Yeah. So there's that. So it's basically it's the beat line, the bass lines and the beat is a little bit different. So you gotta you gotta get into it. So it's interesting because I'll take this rock stuff and I'll put a little barbecue sauce on it. I'll make it a little more, but this is too simple, Yeah, so I'm into the more advanced drummers and things like that. The guys that play it 100% all the time. So
there's a cool clip of Harry Connick Jr. because like when music is playing, if it's a white audience, they'll clap on the 1 and 3. And so there's this clip of Harry Connick Jr. where he's playing on the piano and he does this like. He adds like an extra note. I don't know exactly the term, but he does something where he's playing the music and then he's forcing them to clap on the 2 and the 4.
Oh, really? He is? Okay.
Yeah, it's a really cool. I don't know what he does, but he kind of changes it up so that now they're clapping on the right beat.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of the American thing. If you want more people to get into it, you better get the 2 and the 4 going, because otherwise it's not happening.
Yeah,
so that's a marketing thing.
So can you talk a little bit more about your like Astro Thrill CD?
Yeah, so that was it's interesting. It came out of the little comic books I was doing. Let's go back. Animators was the first comic book that I did, and that was when I was at working on Mortal Kombat, and I was doing all the 3D, and I wanted to get back into drawing. So that was that was my release. Going back into drawing was doing those comic books. And then on the inside cover of Animators, I'd have these little Astro Thrill comics, which is kind of a space alien thing, because I was working on a little space alien story while I was working, doing the. I had these little thumbnails. I thumbnailed this whole movie of this little Astro Thrill space alien on when my scenes were rendering on Softimage. It took forever to render. It's like, oh, what am I doing? So I'd be thumbing stuff, and so I had this whole bunch of Astro Thrill stories about this half alien, half human that came to Earth and wanted to play rock and roll, and he's being chased by other aliens, and come back to work in the mines, stuff like that. So I had this whole storyline with that, and it became kind of a mini story inside the Nemesis comics. I eventually did 7 of those, and that's done as a series. It's a whole story. And then I just compiled the Astro Thrill ones and came up with a short movie, an Astro Thrill movie, animated. I was learning Flash. That's when I was working at Film Roman on the side. I would, learning Flash, and got this thing done. That took me, I was just learning it before I knew what I was doing in Flash, and took me 5 years to do this 10-minute short. I do things a lot faster now,
Yeah.
but a lot faster, yeah. So anyway, I did that, and then I did a short, basically it was a couple of singles that played all the instruments, played guitar and sang and all that stuff. And I compiled them all into a comic book called Astro Thrill Desert Planet Disc. So you get it's a comic book, and you get a 17-track compilation CD, and I'll put the movie in there too if you want the movie. So I got that. So that's like a package of that era. So
nice.
Yeah.
So what do you hope for the future of animation as far as innovation, storylines, characters?
Storylines, what I'm doing right now, I'm just trying to get into the American history, the kind of pre-Columbian American history as far as what I'm doing. Stuff in the future, I like to see more spiritually based material in terms of the history of man, the history of life in the solar system, that type of thing. More of a kind of a wider world view, and hopefully to expand people's minds and bring people together. Because I think that's kind of where we're at right now at this critical junction of transition is where we're at, where the age of Aquarius, etc. It's supposed to be the age of enlightenment, where the veil is lifted and you're finding out what the secrets are in the world and in life. And I think it's up to the storytellers to put those visions in stories that people can relate to, and with new characters, with that new paradigm, and to trying to bridge worlds and bring people together and raise the veil of things that have been hidden. So it's revelation and bringing people together. And I think that's kind of what is needed at this point. As far as the motion picture industry, we're it's really strange because all these theaters are closed now. And so these large budgeted, like, how are we going to do an Avengers movie now? Those are $300 million movies. Are you going to make that up in streaming fees? So how's that going to work without a theatrical film industry?
Right.
So that's kind of, the big budget things are kind of up in the air. But that kind of opens it up for the independent people to want to tell smaller budget things, and then mid price things are going to be probably your tentpole things, so but just being for streaming, etc. But all the independent stuff that, like what I was telling you about, I think that the opportunities are there for all the people to tell these small stories, in small bits or longer bits or binge bits, whatever you want to do. So it's kind of up to the independent filmmakers to use the opportunities that exist now to tell those stories, because the audience is there and it's a worldwide audience. A lot of people speak English now, and they're broadcasting this stuff all over the world, so your audience is huge. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Because I guess people have made it through all of Netflix and all of Hulu, so they're still looking for content to watch in the pandemic.
It's my kids are Avengers experts now. They've seen everything 20 times, everything on there. So new streamers are coming up. I guess Paramount's coming up pretty soon, and they're gonna burn through their library. But there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been produced yet. So that's kind of where we're at this point. So,
and then when you're talking about the truth of history, and when you were mentioning Native Americans earlier, like the idea that, when they first think of like Lewis and Clark notes or people who would come over here, they would actually talk about in their journals that the Native Americans were dark skinned.
Absolutely.
So Like now it's more associated with being lighter skinned, but they
Right.
essentially looked black.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
some of the journals, so I can see, like, you know, and then the idea of like black cowboys, like, you know, cowboy is only associated with being black or white, and
Right.
I discovered like Vikings weren't just white, like, so
Right. Right.
it's
Yeah.
like
It's
so much stuff.
Yeah, and the anthropologists are kind of revealing that as well because you can't can't lie with what's in the ground. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm,
And also the geologists, as they're finding out, what happened during the Younger Dryas period.
mhm,
That's basically when they had the flood.
mhm,
And opened up the Bering Straits, etc. There was a meteor hit that was in northern part of the United States near Canada
mhm,
that kind of uh, exploded and it started the flood.
mhm,
And if you go, you can see through the parts of Canada, so you can see the floodplains and all that stuff. And that's what opened up the flood for the Bering Strait people to come in 15,000 years ago.
mhm,
But the anthropologists are finding out there were people here all the way back in San Diego, all the way back 100,000 years ago. And
mhm,
so there were two groups of quote unquote American Indians. There was the Mongolians and the Australasians,
mhm,
and who were black,
mhm,
and then the Negroids, from Africa, et cetera, et cetera, were here already.
mhm.
So, if you're a conquistador, you're not going to really tell you that if you're trying to take over people,
Yeah.
and get them off the land.
Mhm,
So anyway, yeah, those are the stories that are unfolding, and we're getting more and more information as we go back in time. Like recently, we found out that Göbekli Tepe goes back
mhm,
even further than Samaria,
mhm,
to 15,000 AD, and we're finding out, what happened to the Sphinx, you
mhm,
know, and how far that goes back 15,000 years ago, because they have the watermarks on the Sphinx. And then if you do
mhm,
the math, you figure out that this was the wet period, et cetera, et cetera. So we're finding out more and more about life here on the Earth
mhm.
as we go. And then more, I think we'll find out life on other planets as well.
Yeah.
So that's the veil that's being lifted right now, and
Mhm,
that's an opportunity to tell all kinds of stories.
mhm.
Because the people are people,
Yeah.
and we can have a larger palette to draw from as well,
Mhm.
and then bring new ideas. So that's what I'm thinking.
And so you've talked about this a little bit, but what do you feel is the importance of incorporating your culture into projects when given the opportunity?
Basically because no one else is doing it.
Mhm,
uh, yeah, I mean, we already know what the name mainstream culture is.
mhm.
They have their chance to do their thing. There's millions of other people that have other stories to tell, and no one's really
Yeah.
telling it. And since we're
Mhm,
here, lucky enough to be here in the United States, we have the opportunity to do that. Someone's going to have to take the lead, or at least open the door.
mhm,
So yeah, I mean, because those are refreshing stories that people, kids, families, etc., would like to take out their people to go see,
yeah,
to tell these stories and to learn and to reflect and have a kind of a wider range of the human experience. And I think it's going to benefit all of us if we
yeah,
get everybody involved in their culture, and it's just to see how wonderful and magical the human existence is in
mhm,
its full breadth of the palette. So I
yeah,
think that's, if you're an animator, the sky's the limit as far as
mhm,
that concerned, because you can tell any type of story. You can press time, you can morph characters,
mhm,
use your artistic talents, etc., etc. So yeah, those stories should be told. It's time.
yeah. Even for the mainstream, if you go like Coco or Black Panther, like Coco is like popular amongst so many different cultures of
Yeah,
kids, and then Black
right.
Panther was like a gangbusters like success. So
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and then that's kind of a hidden thing because there was a Native American tribe, the Wakanda tribe. So
mhm.
we'll get into that. So there's a inside twist on that. You know what I mean?
Nice.
So yeah, and if that was somebody else telling that story, it'd probably be a little bit different.
Mhm,
Yeah. So yeah. So yeah, that'd be interesting. Imagine if it took place in Cahokia, possibly. Which was, yeah. So anyway, we won't go into that, but that was the
So
largest city in the world in the 1400s
nice.
in the
Yeah,
United States.
it'll be interesting because I like the idea. With Black Panther, I like the idea of, okay, what would the world have looked like for Africa if it was untouched and able to just go skyrocket? So that'll be interesting to do with the
Right.
like Native American culture and stories too.
Yeah, yeah, it really
Because
would.
if
It
you think
really
about
would.
like the how they destroyed was it the Mayans and the Incas, or like they just destroyed all of their information. So they had
Yeah,
so such sophisticated things that
right.
they just destroyed. Like what?
Yeah,
So,
I think the Vatican has the only remaining copies of that stuff, and that's it. So everything is gone. So now it's just kind of yeah, it's ancient stories, rock carvings, and archaeology is the only way to dig that stuff up.
yeah.
I know a lot of the Mayans. Some of them went to Cambodia, believe it or
Mhm,
not, and others just disappeared. Some went to North America
mhm,
during Cahokia. The reason they had some of the sacrifice ceremonies, I think some of the Mayans went up there and introduced that to them.
mhm,
Not too many, but yeah, and the Olmecs disappeared as well.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, and then there's interesting stories about where they went to
Yeah.
anyway, but it's we won't get into that, but that's for a later date. Yeah.
So what do you hope Black animation professionals do in this current landscape that you wish you could have done? So like with all this technology that we have access to, I mean, you're still
Uh-huh.
doing it, but what do you hope like emerging and a little bit established Black animation professionals are doing in this current landscape?
Yeah, it's amazing. I'd really like there to be maybe a Black studio would be great. So we can tell our own stories. That'd be great. Um,
Mhm,
I think at this point, individual filmmakers go ahead and do your stories, and then maybe at some point an aggregator,
mhm,
which would be a producer, could
mhm.
bring all these storytellers together and create a studio later. But don't stop that from making your stories. So
Right.
go ahead and do your stories and build up your IP. Because stuff gets recycled, and it may be old. You want to do a new version of your IP and build up a world. That's another thing storytellers are doing now, is not telling individual stories. They're creating worlds.
Mhm,
Right. So multiple stories can go in. Look at Marvel, for instance,
mhm.
or Harry Potter, for instance. There's all these spin-off stories in that. So not only create your story, create your world, and all your little projects can spin off of that, and keep building that. Your
Yeah.
different IP. Even if you don't have the funds to maybe do a movie, do a graphic novel. You
Mhm,
still have that story done, for your IP, or do another piece of a story, or like a series of paintings and things like that. So it's like
mhm.
you're always creating your IP and then building, and then eventually somebody will come around and grab it and bring your stuff to life. But
Yeah.
sometimes things take a long time to germinate. Like for instance, the Crow movie that took 14 years to happen. There was a
Mhm,
period in the 90s where I was doing a lot of the comic books and things like that, and a lot of the creators were doing the comics in the hopes of becoming animated projects. And there
mhm.
was a period that HBO was like going down through the HBO animation was going down the independent publishers pavilion, and then just plucking all these creators and stuff like that and making IP, etc.
Mhm,
So, like for instance, Yona Vasquez that did the Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, and
mhm,
Vader Zim was his spin-off to that. So basically, he was creating his IP through these comic books, and then
mhm.
Invader Zim was a spin-off of that.
Yeah.
So as an animator, etc., create your stories, and then eventually you can either do them, animate them yourself, or present them to a studio, etc. But you're creating a world. So as you create your brand and your stories, um, hopefully people will pick that up, or just
Mhm.
produce it yourself. So it's just like always be creating. Always create your own IP. I think that's really important, to create your own stories, not be so much interested in working on other people's stuff. I mean, it's good to pay the bills, etc., and to build up chops. But we're at the point where content is king.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of creators out there, and there's a lot of interesting stories that probably in your closet or in your drawer, there's probably just great because you stopped on it, and seen it. So just keep working it and keep, every 5, because I don't really watch TV anymore. I've seen all the TV I need to do, need to see. And, I go to movies when something's really special.
Yeah.
So I don't really spend a lot of time watching other people's stuff at this point. I'm always creating. So there's a fine balance as a creator. You want to be informed about the latest bits of stuff or the latest ways of telling stories as you're learning, etc. But at some point you have to stop and start doing your stuff.
Yes.
And so just keep that going all the time and just create, because it's taken me like 20 years to build up my IP. I've got a lot of stuff now, but I can go into a meeting and here's something kids think. Oh, here's because you built it up over the years. So that's what I would suggest to any creator now. Is it's just keep working on your stories and your properties, and if you can animate shorts to bring a bit of that together, that's good. If you can animate a feature, that's good. If you could just do a comic book, a one-off comic, fine. If you could do graphic novel, which can be translated into a story, like for instance, Michel Gagne, who's effects animator that came out of Warner Brothers and Iron Giant, etc., etc. He did a series of comic books called Zed, which is basically a comic book, right? But he kept all the Photoshop files, and he's using those Photoshop files in his feature film, which he's doing by himself. He did a short in Toon Boom. He was learning Toon Boom, and he brought his Photoshop files and animated over it. It looked great. And then there was a film company in Belgium that optioned it. And I guess he wanted to do the film himself, so he took it back. So now he's spending 2 years on his own doing the film himself. And so once again, you start with the comic book, and you can bring those same files into your animated project and then work with that as a base and then build it from there. And of course, he has all this other IP as well. So he's building a world of his vision, which is kind of cool. So I would suggest that whatever your world is, and just, go from there. So as an independent, that's what I would do.
So if a couple more questions. If you had a documentary, what things would you highlight about yourself outside of your work in animation?
Wow. I don't know. Let's see. Wow. My kids. My kids probably. Being a dad, it's great. I have 2 girls. That and coming out of the surf culture and skateboarding culture, that type of thing. That whole Dogtown thing, I kind of grew up with that. The music, the whole kind of punk rock thing that was happening, because just seeing that progress and seeing it kind of take over. And you think of what Lollapalooza and all that stuff, is that. And I don't know, being around the film business and some of the Brat Pack actors are actually my friends, just to see how they kind of revolutionized Hollywood for a period, which is kind of interesting. And how Los Angeles has changed, how it is now, which is kind of difficult. But so that and working hard. So that's it. I guess so. That's it.
Cool. So where can people purchase your art and music?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm kind of all over. I've got, you can go to my main website, which is craig-clark.com. That's my portfolio website. There's that. There's a new entity that I'm starting called Jingle King Entertainment, which I'm starting with a friend of mine. We're doing animation and we have a shop and things like that. And we're doing music for websites, jingles as well. And let's see, I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group for for the Custom Monsters, Custom Monsters group. That's on there. I'm on Instagram at Craig_Clark_Anim on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter there. I think it's Mummy Daddy-O or Craig Clark, one of the two. I'm not on there that much, but yeah, I'm usually working. But yeah, check those out, and then you can see the Custom Monsters on OSI 74 on Roku. Yeah, so I have you see the 2 movies and the 20 episodes and all kinds of fun stuff. Yeah.
Well, Craig, I'd like to thank you for sitting down with me and sharing your life. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody. Great to see you, and keep working hard.
And for everyone out there, I want you to like So I Know It's Real, comment and tell me how to subscribe to Seal the Deal, and sign up for post notifications to show your zeal. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.